and tell us your name and where you were born again, and then tell us about how you got into the Army.
Okay, I'm Glenn T. Toy, born July 1st, 1921 at Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Graduated from Chippewa Falls High School in 1939, and on July 31st, 1942, I enlisted in the U.S. Army. Went directly to Camp Barkley, Texas, in the Medical Corps. Was there for 9 months, and had taken a test for ASTP. And in the spring of '43, I think about May 1st, I was shipped to Texas A&M and stayed there a couple of weeks, and from there went on to Las Cruces, New Mexico A&M.
What do you remember about your ASTP college experience?
Well, it was a pretty rigorous course, I remember that, and I was one of the few that had never had any college education at that time, and so I found it slightly difficult for a while. They really poured it on, and we had a really enjoyable time down there. The weather was great, and we had a lot of the community that backed us up and invited us out. As far as the education part of it was concerned, it was mainly engineering subjects, and I was there till the very end, the first one in and the last one out, I guess. So I spent about 10 months in school before they shipped us out to the infantry.
Do you remember anything about your professors?
I remember 2 or 3 of the professors. I only remember the name of Dr. Walden, who taught trigonometry and calculus and mathematical subjects. I really don't remember the names of any of the others.
Did you like the professors? Did they like you?
They had some good people down there, and yeah, they were good instructors, knew their business, and Dr. Walden especially, I think it was Walden, maybe it was Walton, but I think it was Walden, had come from somewhere in the Midwest, and his wife was ill, so he had gone down there for her health. And he was a top-notch professor in my estimation.
Did you have a lot of free time, or was it a lot of classwork?
Free time was minimal, except on weekends. You had, I don't remember if we had all day Saturday or it seems to me we had a half a day Saturday off and Sunday. And other than that, you were studying, and every night they checked on you to be sure you were there.
So it was just like the military?
In a sense it was, yeah. I had a kind of a break that most guys didn't have there. Each semester, whatever they call it, I don't remember now. I think it was about 3 months. They chose one individual to be what they called cadet commander of the unit. And once you got to be the top dog, you didn't have to stand any formations, or you didn't march in formations to and from classes. And so for me, it was just like a civilian campus, but most of the guys had to get up for reveille and march to classes and stuff like that.
And you wore your uniform.
Yeah, yes.
How did you get chosen to be the unit commander?
Well, I don't know. I guess they kind of took a liking to me for some reason or other. I think a little might have had to do with the fact that I had 9 months of training before I got there, and most of the guys were, you know, a lot less than that. So I knew a bit more about military life, probably. And had been in parades and stuff like that, and that was part of the job of being a cadet commander. When you had a parade or a review of any kind, well, you had to lead that. So I don't know how they chose me, but I would guess there were about 5 of us while I was there that rotated. And before we left, they took, I think, all of those 5 or 4, whatever it was, and had an OCS board that you went to, and they interviewed you. And then that went on your record, apparently, that you had passed the OCS board. And, so that's about the way I remember it.
Okay. Did anything funny happen to you while you were at college, or exciting?
Well, not terribly exciting. We had one lieutenant that was the man I was under, who was a little more loose, I guess you'd call it, than the average. He'd take us out in the desert, and we'd have a beer bust out there every once in a while, things like that.
Oh, okay.
I, fortunately, or whatever, I had a girlfriend there that had a car, so that worked out pretty good.
Good.
It was a little unusual in those days for kids to have their own car, you know. Gas was scarce. So I enjoyed it. The weather was great. We had a nice swimming pool there. So when you did have some time off, there were things to do.
Did you, were you older than most of the other?
A little bit, yeah. See, I was 23 years old at that time. And a lot of the fellows had just come out of high school. And I'd been out of high school since '39, which made it, going back a little bit, some additional difficulty, I guess, in that I hadn't had any recent education. So I had to kind of catch up.
Did you maintain good grades?
I had good grades except in chemistry. I never did understand chemistry, and I still don't. So, but other than that, yeah, I had good grades.
How do you feel about the ASTP program?
I personally, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me, I think. I doubt that I would have gone to college. I may have, but who knows? You know, at least that gave me the incentive to carry on after I got out of the Army. And it also may have saved my life. After this fiasco that you've heard so much about at Hermesheim, I I got out of there, fortunately, without a scratch. And at the time I went overseas, I was a PFC or a private, I guess. I'm not sure which. But anyway, prior to this Herlisheim thing, I was promoted to a sergeant, and then right after a staff sergeant. And then going back to that OCS interview, which was in my records, I guess, they called me in one day, the captain, company commander, and said, you're going to OCS. So they sent me back to Fontainebleau, France, which is just out of Paris. And I went to OCS there and graduated in the first OCS class ever graduated on the continent. And then headed back to the 12th, and before I got back, the war was over. I was in a replacement depot on my way up, waiting for transportation when the war ended.
So you didn't see much combat?
Well, yeah, I saw enough. Not, compared to a lot of fellows, was only from, well, let's see, December, January, February, about 3 months is about the total of my combat experience. Then when I got back to the 12th, they didn't put me back in my original unit. While I'd been gone, they brought in those colored troops. And so we had a company attached to the regular company, or the regular battalion, of colored soldiers that had volunteered from the Quartermaster Corps and I don't know where all. And so they assigned me as an officer in one of those companies in the 17th Infantry.
Okay. Going back to the ASTP school, when you found out that the program was ending, what happened?
What happened?
What?
Well, after the word came out, it was, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 weeks before they actually shipped us out. And they gave us a choice of goofing off or continuing classes. And I continued some of the classes that I was taking. The calculus, for one, I remember. I liked that. So some of us did that, others just kind of goofed off.
Did you know where you were going when
No.
you shipped out?
No, I thought, I spent 9 months at Camp Barkley out there in the sagebrush and wind and dust, and I thought, well, hopefully I'll get a good camp now. Well, they shipped me right back to Camp Barkley, so I spent a total of 16 months there.
When you went back to Camp Barkley, how did you get assigned to the 66?
I'll be darned if I know. They just read your name off, and that's where you went, wherever I don't know how they decided. See, with 9 months of medical training, I probably should have gone into the 82nd or whatever that medical, the 82nd. But I guess they forgot about that.
How long were you at Camp Barkley the second time?
Well, I think we arrived there in April of 44. And I don't remember just when we left, about October, I think, of 44. So about 6 or 7 months, I guess.
Did you feel like you were ready to go into combat?
Well, I don't know that you ever feel you're ready, but yeah, I was ready to do something. I'd been in the Army for like from 42, middle of 42 till 44, so I figured I ought to be doing something.
Tell me about your combat experiences.
Well, how much detail do you want to go into? I don't want to get into all.
You get into as much detail as you feel comfortable.
Well, we started out hitting some of the small villages and didn't have too rough a time for quite a while. I remember Christmas of '44, where we were out about 5 miles out in front of the main line of resistance and just scattered out real thin. That was about the time of the bulge up north, and they pulled everybody out that they could spare from our part of the front. So we were up there pretty well exposed. Nothing happened especially, but a little incident maybe of interest to nobody but me anyway. On Christmas Day, I remember up there in that foxhole, and the snow was about that deep, you know. They came up and said, "We got a Christmas package for you," so they gave me a package from my sister from home. And that was great, you know. I thought anyway, till I opened it up. It was a box of those chocolate-covered cherries, and the greenest mold you ever saw in your life just covered all those cherries and or chocolates, and it had apparently been in the hold of some ship for too long, you know. So my Christmas present was moldy chocolate. But we had an old mess sergeant that old tiny Lazari, and boy, he saw to it that we got food right up there in the foxhole, you know. I'm trying to think of some of the. I remember one kind of odd experience, or a little, it was kind of almost comical, but we loaded up on the back of the tanks one morning and took off, and as we came up this hill, the tanks all stopped just before they got over the brow of the hill where they could be seen, and we got off and they said, "Scouts out." And I was a scout, so I took off over the hill, and as they're going down the other side, I saw a fence row and a German on a machine gun sitting there all hunched over his gun, and I fired 2 or 3 rounds, and he never moved. I got down there, he was froze solid right on that gun. I imagine they had set the guy up that way just to distract us. But I don't know where to go from there. Trying to think of something might be of interest. We kept moving around every once in a while at night. 4 o'clock in the morning, we'd be sound asleep in some burned out building or some shelter of some kind, and the sergeant would come around and say, "We're moving out," so we just scrambled around to find all your stuff in the dark and get ready to go. And, those were the most nervous type times for me. When action started, you kind of didn't think about it, you know, you just went along with it. But when you had time to sit back and think, well, we're going to go now, and you start worrying a little bit. Of course, the worst time we got into was up there that I got into, because I left about a month after that. But I'm sure you've heard all the stories about Herbicide or Steinwald Woods. I don't know how I got out of there. There were only 6 of us in my platoon of about 60 that got out. And when the word came down to get up and go, I got up and went, you know, and there was a ditch about, I suppose, 75 yards in front of me, and I took off and got down there into that ditch, and my sergeant, my platoon sergeant, was there with me, and we were the only two that got there. The rest of them got hit on the way. And those that got up, a lot of them never moved. And then the sergeant, one of those machine guns was quite near us, and we were going to try to get to that, and the guys were firing in there. So the sergeant said, go out and find Lieutenant Booth and ask him to get those guys to quit firing so we could get up closer to that gun. I ran back out there again and found Lieutenant Booth and gave him the message, and then ran back again, and I remember seeing those machine gun bullets kicking up the dirt and the snow in front of me and jumping over the ground, burst to miss it, and I never got touched. So I made 3 trips across there in front of that gun, and somehow got through.
Did you get the gun that you were going?
Well, before I got a chance to get up there, I had a hand grenade, and I pulled a pin on it, and that ditch was full of ice, and when you put your weight on it, it all fell down. There was no water on it, but there was about 3 inches of ice. And to try to maneuver in that bunch of ice cubes was difficult. But by the time I got up close enough, why, they had already taken off. So never did really see them.
How did you get back to your unit?
Well, time is, I've lost track of time that day. I don't know what time it was, but eventually, sometime in the afternoon, those of us that were able to move got word to pull out. So we took off down this drainage ditch and worked our way back and got out of there. But it was a terrible thing to leave all those other fellows there, you know. You don't normally do that, but we didn't have a chance to get out and help him, because if anybody moved, he was dead. So I went back, and 3 of us, I think, Sergeant Holland, myself, and one other fellow went back and found Colonel Wells, who was our battalion commander, and told him what the situation was up there, and that the officers were all dead, or we thought they were anyway. And at that time, he put Sergeant Holland in charge of the company. Told him right there to go back and take over what was left of the company. And there was still one officer that never went that morning, and I don't recall whatever happened, whether he then took over the company or whether Sergeant Holland kept it, or I don't remember what happened after that. Anyway, a couple of days later, we pulled out of there, moved somewhere else. Then, you want me to continue on? Okay, the next thing that I remember quite well was when we moved down to Colmar. And after the fighting in Colmar had ended, we were attached into the 1st French Army, I think it was. And from Colmar, we took off at one night and drove all night to a little town called Rufac. And we got there early in the morning. It was pitch black out. but they stopped right on the edge of town, and they wanted a little perimeter protection, so they sent me and my squad out, and I placed them along a cross street that was in front of us there. And I decided I'd go out and check the street out a little bit, as well as I could. In the pitch black, I got out there in the street and started up the sidewalk, and there was a rock wall along the sidewalk, and there was an indentation where there was an opening for a garage. And I got to that, and all of a sudden I heard two guys running my direction. And yeah, I had a split second to decide, what am I going to do, you know? And I couldn't get my hand grenade out. I didn't know whether to let them go by or shoot or what. So I just yelled, halt. And they were about from here to that table from me, I think. They both stopped, and they had these little machine pistols, and they both opened up with those. And fortunately, I was back behind the wall, so they didn't harm me any, but scared me a little bit. And then they immediately turned around and took off back up the street. So I think I was about the only guy that had any excitement that morning after we got into town. It was the only Germans I saw there. I think that they just probably stayed with their girlfriends or something. So that night, they decided they wanted a squad to go out on a patrol. They had heard that, see, we had the Germans trapped in the Vosges Mountains, and the Colmar Pocket, it was called at that time. And we had captured some prisoners, and they had told us that these Germans were going to try and come out that night, and told us where they thought they were going to try to get out. So my squad was selected to go out and try to intercept those guys and ambush them. Well, we had to go up along a canal. The bank of the canal had a trail on it, or a road or something, but like I said before, it was just raining terribly hard, and so you couldn't see the guy in front of you hardly, you know. So we went for about, I guess, a mile up that canal bank. We were supposed to find a bridge to cross the canal, and then we were supposed to find a railroad trestle where those guys were expected to come out and pass under the railroad through that trestle. Well, we got up to the bridge across the canal and decided to stop and see how we're doing. I went back to check and see if my squad was all still with me. Then I got back to the back end. I had two extra guys. I had two Germans with the rifles and the whole shebang following right along with us, you know. And I don't know if they thought it was their guys that they were following, or whether they realized they were the enemy. But anyway, they didn't put up any fight or anything. And I took one guy from the squad and told him to take him back to town, which he did. So a little excitement there. But we crossed the bridge and we never did find the railroad trestle. Went over on the other side and sat there in the mud for half the night till somebody came and relieved us. Never did see another German, just those two that fell in. So it wasn't too long after that, maybe another couple of weeks, I guess, that I was sent off to OCS.
When you were at OCS, tell me some of the things that you did.
Well, we'd go on training exercises, and it seemed that those of us that had been in combat got a lot less checking on than some of the other. There were a bunch of fellows from the Air Force that had volunteered. They were then Air Force ground school people. And they had volunteered for the infantry for, I don't know why, but they did. And they seemed to concentrate on trying to teach those guys something about combat. And those of us that had been through it, I never was asked to run a problem or given any special instructions. You know, we all sat through classes and stuff like that, but to actually go out and take a group of men and act like you were actually in a battle, I never did that. But those Air Force guys were, you know, I spent an awful lot of time teaching them how to take an M1 rifle apart. They had never had one. So that was, I don't know how long we were there, 60 days or something like that, I guess. Anyway, by the time I graduated on April 26th and went back to the 12th, why, like I said before, the war was over.
What happened after you got back to the 12th?
Well, I mentioned I was assigned to that colored outfit, and again, dates escape me, but I might have spent 2 months there, and then they shipped all those guys. I don't know where they went home or where they went, but they left. And I was then transferred to the 36th Division. I spent a short time with the 36th Division, and then was transferred to 1264th Combat Engineer Company, or battalion, I don't know what it was. Anyway, they were cutting trees and loading them onto rail cars and shipping them to the mines up in the Ruhr for supports for the roof of the mines. And I didn't spend a lot of time there, but the Germans were great at growing their own forests, you know, and they knew when every tree was planted. The woods were all in rows, you know. They knew when every tree was planted, the old Forestmeister, and he'd go out there and put a flag on the ones that he would expect you to take. And he wouldn't put many flags out, so we'd go out there after he left and tie flags on a lot more trees. And so that's what we did. And I only spent, I don't know, 3 weeks or so there, I suppose. And then I was transferred to an outfit, what they called an Engineering General Service Regiment, which they said was in Berlin. Well, my instructions, my orders read, report to the 355th in Berlin. So I took off with a Jeep driver, me and I think one other guy, and headed for Berlin. And we hit the Russian zone, and of course, they stopped us right there. I didn't realize that there was only one way into Berlin at that time. So then we had to go way up to Hanover and go into Berlin on the Autobahn. And it was kind of a new experience. We'd be rolling along the Autobahn, and all of a sudden there'd be a couple of Russians come out of the woods with their machine guns, and they'd get out in front of you and stop you. And they want anything of value that, you know, like a wristwatch or a pair of gloves or anything like that that they didn't have. Why, they'd want to buy it from you. And the Russians, the money they had was the same as our invasion money. In fact, it was printed by the American government. The only difference was the serial number on their bills was different than ours. But it was of no value to them at home. We could send money home, go buy a money order, send it home. They hadn't been paid since they got in the service, and so they had all kinds of money, but it was the only place they could spend it was where they were. So they'd buy anything they had, cigarettes, wristwatches, and they wanted to buy our Jeep. Couldn't figure out why we wouldn't sell the Jeep, And the fuel and the gas cans on the back, they'd want those. I had a nice pair of leather gloves. I don't know, they offered me, I don't know how much for my leather gloves. Finally, they decided, I guess, they weren't going to get anything, so they let us go. But I got up to Berlin and started looking for the 355th, and there was no such thing there. I found a 335th General Service Regiment, so I reported into them, and they said, we don't have any record of you. And they said, just stick around a while, and they made me recreation officer. I spent, I suppose, 2 weeks there as recreation officer. And finally, word came down that I belonged down in Bremerhaven, Germany. And they apparently had completely lost track of me. So then I took off and went down to Bremerhaven and took over as company commander of an engineering company down there. And we were building a big reception center for Army of Occupation families. As they came over, they landed at Bremerhaven, and we took over a big apartment building there and built a big mess hall and put in a new heating plant and completely redid the plumbing system and stuff like that. So I stayed there till May of '46. And shipped out from there to home. I don't remember the date. I'm sure it was May 46. Got back to New York, and the first guys that came back, they had big bands out there to welcome them. When we got there, there was a little, about a 20-foot boat, and they had a PA system on it. They were playing records for us. And that was our reception. So from there I went to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, and had an operation there for hernia. And on July 31st, my terminal leave was up, so I was out of the service. I had joined the reserves and was in the reserves for several years. And when the Korean War broke out, my unit commander said, you better get your stuff in order because you're going to go. Which didn't thrill me very much, And after spending 4 years in another war, I didn't want to go there. So I don't know what happened. I never got called. Well, I do know what happened. They called the inactive reserves instead of the active. How they decided to do that, I don't know. But that's the way it was. And so I didn't go. Thank goodness. So that about winds up my Army career.
What did you do after that?
In the fall of '46, I went down and enrolled at the University of Wisconsin at Madison in civil engineering. and graduated in February of 1950. And directly after that, I came out west to Washington and went to work on the canals and stuff up in the Columbia Basin. At that time, we were in the midst of a recession, and hardly anybody was hiring. You know, you were lucky to find any kind of a job. The Bureau of Reclamation was hiring people, and state highway departments. Other than that, there was hardly anything available. So I went to work for the Bureau of Reclamation, and up in Quincy, Washington, which at that time was sagebrush and dust. That's all there was. The little town of Quincy had a filling station, a general store, one tavern, and I suppose maybe 150 people, and that was it. So I stayed there not too long. About 16 months, I think. Then I signed on with a large construction company, Morrison Knudsen Construction, and spent 35 years working for them as an engineer and manager. So I retired in February of 1986.
When you went back to college, did a lot of your AST credits transfer?
Some of them counted, and I don't know why I didn't sit down and talk to those people a little bit. I told you before that I never did understand chemistry. Well, they gave me credit for the chemistry that I'd had down there for the first semester, but I still had to take the second semester. And the physics that I had, I understood, I thought, almost perfectly, you know. I'd gone through it twice. Had a book called by Hossman and Slack. Got to the University of Wisconsin, and they gave me my books and had the same doggone text again, Hossman and Slack. And they didn't give me any credit for the physics courses that I'd had, which, you know, I'm sure I could have talked them into switching that around a little bit. But anyway, went through the doggone book again. So I figured I was pretty knowledgeable with physics after I got through that. But I got about one semester credit, I think, total. Then I went to summer school and whatever to get through as quick as I could. See, I was 25 when I started, so I was 30 years old almost when I graduated.
Were you married at that time?
I got married while I was in school, 1947.
Did you keep in touch with any of the guys that you had gone through the AST program with?
Well, just mainly through these meetings, you know. Yeah, I would talk to one once in a while, but we'd get together at these meetings, and that was kind of a fun experience, getting to talk to those guys again. Of course, you know, as you're well aware, we came from a lot of different schools. You didn't get acquainted with the guys from the other schools until you got assigned to a unit with them, like Gil Heine and those fellas. I didn't know until we all got to the 12th. And so yeah, we kept some contact with them.
Did any of the guys that you were in your program at college with, did they go to the 12th with you, or did you get separated?
Yeah, quite a few of them, a lot of them. In fact, I don't know, they told us last night, I think think 300 and some from Las Cruces north to the 12th. I may be wrong there, but there was a number somewhere in that range.
Anything else you want to share with us? You're doing a good job.
Well, can't really think of anything. We've now got a couple of kids that are getting up in their early 50s. One is 50 and one's 48. They live up in Seattle. We got 3 grandkids, 3 granddaughters. One's 24, one's 22, and one's 12, I think. And I don't know if I mentioned, we live in Boise, Idaho. Been there for 30 years. Spent about 14 years in Seattle before moving to Boise. And still have relatives back in Wisconsin where I grew up. Got a brother in North Dakota at Fargo. I got a sister back home. And numerous cousins and stuff like that. We don't go back there often anymore. My mother died last year, 101, and before that we tried to get back every year, but we probably won't now. So that's pretty much my life, I guess.
When you were away overseas, did you get a lot of mail from home? I know you said you got the moldy.
Yeah, I got regular mail, and I sent quite a bit of mail home, and I found out about, I suppose 5, 6, 7 years ago now that my mother had kept all my letters.
Wow.
So I got those when I found out about it. I took them all, and I've got them at home. I haven't gone through them again. They're kind of boring. But anyway, I got them, and I figured I'd give them to my kids.
Did you
Going way back to the start of things, you know, from 1921 when I was born to 29, I don't remember much about, but in 29, the Depression hit. And in 32, we lost our farm, and times were pretty tough back then. And then you remember, you've heard of the, what they call it, the Dust Bowl. Well, Wisconsin wasn't in the Dust Bowl, but we got all the dust from North Dakota and South Dakota that was heading east. You could see it coming, you know. And we'd get up every morning. I was on a farm, and look in the sky, see if there was a cloud where we might get some rain. And it didn't rain for weeks and weeks, and the crops were almost nil that year. And so losing the farm and going through the Dust Bowl and all that stuff was trying times. We found a vacant farm there that had been vacant for several years. Rented that thing, and the first year's rent was whatever it cost us to make it livable. So we had to put new windows in the house and the barn, and clean the place up where the pigeons had been roosting, and hobos had been sleeping in the house. And so we got that place the first year just for making it livable. So that's going back, kind of repeating myself, but I just thought I'd mention that.
Do you think that helped you prepare for combat when you were going to vacant buildings?
I don't know if it prepared me for combat, but it prepared us for life. you know, pretty frugal people came out of that period. And it's a different world now. People, you know, you didn't have any money. Nobody had money. Fortunately, on the farm, we could eat because we raised a few chickens and cattle and pigs and gardens, stuff like that. But I think it made me a little bit of a tightwad, but I took care of myself and ended up with enough so that we're pretty well fixed and don't have to worry about money in our old days like some people do. But you can take the people from that period and they've all got pretty much that same attitude, you know, that money doesn't grow on trees. It didn't then anyway.
When you were at college, you said you had a girlfriend. Did you stay in touch with her?
Did I what?
Stay in touch with your college girlfriend?
Well, I don't know whether I ought to talk about that. That's I told my wife, see, I came back and we had kept in touch all the time I was overseas. And I came back and I had promised her that I'd come back to Las Cruces if I got back in one piece. And I don't know to this day what happened, but I never went back. And I quit writing to her for some dumb reason, I don't know. And I told my wife 2 or 3 times I wish I knew where she was so I could apologize to her, you know. And my wife said, well, why don't you call her? Well, you don't know their name after she's obviously probably married somebody and moved who knows where, you know. So I had no way of getting in touch with her. But I always felt guilty for cutting that off the way I did, you know. It was pretty crude. She's a nice girl.
Do you remember her name?
Yeah.
So you haven't ever tried to find her?
Mm-hmm.
You haven't ever tried to go back and find her?
No, not really. I remember that she, I think, was about a sophomore at Las Cruces. And then she, while I was overseas, she transferred to some school down in Texas. And I don't even know the name of the school, so I couldn't write to the Alumni Association and find out. I suppose there's some way I could find out, but I don't know if my wife would appreciate too much effort there.
When you were at Las Cruces, were you in school with civilians?
Yes. Well, they didn't attend classes, our classes, but they had their own classes. They were all around the campus at the same time. There were a few civilian fellows in a few of our engineering classes, I think. I don't know if it was whether they were just monitoring the classes or whether it was for rate of credit or what. But yeah, there were a few civilians.
Did you have civilian instructors?
Yes.
Were you able to, on the weekends when you had your free time, did you socialize with the civilians?
Quite often, yeah. They would have parties at their churches and stuff like that, and invite the fellows to attend. And we had a big military ball there at one time. We went to that. That was at the college. We thought that was a big deal, you know. It was kind of an unusual experience for me. I was a kind of a shy guy. Dancing was not one of my favorites, you know. And I got almost roped in to go into that thing. And that was at the time I was a cadet commander, so I had to show up and took this girl that we've been talking about. So I got out and tried to do my thing, but wasn't too proud of it.
When you went to Camp Barkley, did you find the same sort of situation where you would go into Abilene?
In 16 months at Camp Barkley, I think I went to Abilene twice. There was what they call those centers where the soldiers...
The USO.
USO. There was a USO place there, and the town was so crowded, we had more people at camp than there were in town by quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you couldn't even walk on the sidewalk, you had to walk in the street, it was so crowded. And there was, Abilene wasn't much of a town,
Mm-hmm.
Still isn't, I guess.
It's gotten bigger.
It's bigger. But anyway, there were no beer joints there, I know that. It was drier than a bull night, is it still?
No.
No. We used to go to Breckenridge to get some beer.
Oh. How did you get to Breckenridge?
Well, 4 or 5 guys would go together and hire a taxi or something.
Was that pretty expensive to do that?
Well, I suppose. I don't remember. There were a few guys that had cars, but very few. But we'd get over there somehow, I don't know. But Abilene, it wasn't a lot to do there. Some of the folks, guys, of course, got acquainted with families and girls in town, stuff like that, but I just pretty much stayed in camp.
What kind of recreation did you have in camp?
Well, we had the post theaters where you had movies, and the PXs where you could go and get some 3-2 beer, and a candy bar or two. And we played baseball. I think we had a pool where we could swim. A few things like that.
Were you on the baseball team?
I don't think so. No. We just get up games, And that's so long ago, I don't remember too much of the details.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
That was wonderful.
Well, don't put it in the movies. Am I all through?
Yes.
Work.